Hello, wherever you are. This is the year of being 70. Lucy McCara had this idea to talk about this on a weekly basis with me. I'm in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Lucy is in Norfolk in the UK. Our mothers were lifelong friends, and we met when we were 8.
Yes, or it
And
works better
so,
if we say seven, doesn't it? Because then 7 to 70, that sounds good.
oh, that sounds much better. You're a marketeer. You always have like these catchphrases. And this week, we're actually going to talk about this is episode 31. And we're going to talk about how it was when we turned 55, like between 55 and 60. I mean, you could say life is basically over, you're old, but I don't think that was true for us. I don't think that's true for many people, actually. And how was it for you? What did you do when you were 55, Lucy?
Well, when I was 55, it was yet another of my major turning points in life. I mean, I think we've kind of gradually gone through our various ages and stages, haven't we? And got up to 55. And I think both of us had quite big turning points when we were 40. When, often again, people think, that is the start of middle age. Are we on the downhill slope? And it wasn't true for either of us at that point. And at 55, certainly for me, it was another turning point, really. I mean, actually, it was it was, perhaps I have them every 2 years. I mean, I'm not, it's kind of something I seem to do quite often. But no, what had actually happened to me was that in the previous few years, I had had a novel published. I'd written two more novels, and I had sort of given up paid work. I mean, I was, in theory, a work-life balance consultant, which had been a very sort of successful 10 years I'd had before that, nicely paying work. And I had been so thrilled by the idea of having my novel published by Macmillan that I thought, aha, this is my new life. Unfortunately, it hadn't actually turned me into J.K. Rowling. So I was I really hadn't earned any money for a couple of years. And then Richard got ill and he wasn't able to work for a bit. And so I was thinking, at that point, I was thinking, I mean, I've kind of generally been someone who hasn't had a structured career, who hasn't thought, I will do this, I will do this, I will, these are my goals, this is what I want to achieve. I have very much been someone who's taken opportunities and run with them and kind of, just taken life on the fly, as it were. So at that point, I thought, you complete idiot, why have you not got a career that you can either fall back on or, any proper qualifications, or why have you not had a regular job where you've been paid money and you've got a pension, and
You've got
why?
this real nice bout of, whipping yourself and
Absolutely,
castigating yourself.
absolutely.
And oh, wow,
Yes.
wow.
So, so I was sort of thinking, what am I going to do? I'm 55. I'm too old probably to be employed by anybody. I mean, I probably wasn't, but it felt like that at the time. I can't even, I'm probably even no good for getting a job in a supermarket. So I then a friend of mine who was doing a an MA at our in Norwich at our further education college said to me, "Do you know that you can do a diploma, a postgraduate diploma in teaching in what they call the lifelong learning sector. So not, teaching small children, but teaching sort of later teenagers and adults." And I thought, ooh, that, and actually, and she said, there's a grant to do that as well. So I thought, yes, this is what I need to do. Teaching is a sensible career move. I will get a qualification, and I'll do that. So I enrolled, and it was actually an amazing thing to do. And I'm so grateful to Mary for having suggested this to me, because it really was, something that I wouldn't have done if I hadn't had to, if I hadn't felt I had to. And it was brilliant. There were 12 of us on this program. The youngest were sort of like 21 and had just finished their degrees. And then there were a number of people sort of older who were changing careers or had, were in a similar position to me thinking, oh God, I need to do something else. But I was by far the oldest. I mean, the
Oh, you
others
were.
were maybe late 30s, the other eldest, older ones. But it was so nice. It was a lovely group of people. I'm still friends with them. We still, get together every now and then. And but also going back to being a student was both extremely refreshing, quite terrifying, and incredibly hard work. I mean, I have to admit, I did think, well, I write for a living. I've always written for a living. I can write essays. This is not going to be too demanding. It was extremely demanding. Academic work had changed since I'd done my degree. It was much more structured what we were doing. Perhaps it was because it was a different, it was a diploma. I mean, I'd done an English and drama degree, so that was pretty kind of loose in a sense. But with the essays that we wrote here, you were told it was where the marking was very transparent. You were told that you had to make these points, you had to address this, you had to give references for this area. You had to cover certain things in an essay. Otherwise, you just didn't get the marks. It was no good, like, I think being creative and coming up with some great ideas. That wasn't going to cut it at all. So that
So
was
was it pedagogy that
yes.
what were you learning?
It
Okay,
was
yeah, yeah,
exactly that. It was pedagogy, and it was fascinating because I'd never done that before. It was learning how to communicate, how to teach, how to give presentations, how to structure lessons. And then, so the first term was academic work almost predominantly, and the second two terms were far more terrifying. They were teaching practice. So it was actual
yeah. To actually do it.
actually teaching. So I had a mentor who was a teacher, and she worked in sort of adult education places. I mean, we had things called Sure Start in those days, where adults who had not had much education could come in and learn new things. So I was specifically, my subjects were adult literacy, which was fascinating because I thought I knew lots of grammar and, but actually I had to learn a lot more, and the way of teaching it to people who knew nothing. And also I had another mentor who did a creative writing course for students within the college. So it was absolutely fascinating and terrifying. And I have such admiration. I mean, I always have had for teachers, but knowing how they have to put lessons together, how they have to create courses, how they have to use the curriculum, how they have to be assessed by other, by other people. By Ofsted is our teaching body, and it was yeah, it was a huge kind of learning curve for me, and fascinating. And at the end of it, I had enjoyed it in many ways. I had learnt a huge amount, but I knew I didn't actually want to be a teacher. And luckily, by that time, but we could talk about that later, austerity had actually kind of hit that year.
Yeah.
And when I started the course, the college said to all of us, there will be jobs for you. There will be teaching jobs for you at the end of this year when you finish your diploma in whatever subject you're choosing to do. We will be able to offer you a teaching job. By the end of the year, the recession had hit really hard. Our government had changed, and the education world had been cut back radically, and there were no jobs. There were no jobs for any of us. I don't think any of us got a job in, or maybe
Hmm.
one or two of us got a job within the college framework that we thought we were all going to be able to work in. So, yeah, so
But then you created your own courses, didn't you?
well, I did. But yes, I mean, I cannot tell you how useful that learning has been in terms of turning into then a mentor for people writing, planning business books. And I have put all that and presentations and speaking, all that sort of thing has been, it was incredibly, incredibly good.
Yeah.
learning for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that
That's
was
the thing
me.
about lifelong learning. And I think, I just
Exactly.
did the Barbara Brennan School from 2001 to 2005, graduating in 2005. And you took this year-long course, which sounds, pretty intense and very rewarding. And so, yeah, we're both good examples of, you know, learning
Exactly.
something new.
Exactly. And I think it's so, I mean, it really kind of, I feel it sort of refreshed my, I don't know, I sort of go back to the that experiment where, they took older people and put them into a situation where, as if they were young again, where their youth had been, and somehow going back to being a student made me kind of opened up my thinking powers, refreshed a whole load of attitudes, I think, for me. It was, and the people I was on the course with were fantastic, and very, very lots of very different kinds of people, which was fascinating. But also the people I was teaching, the students, the younger students who I was teaching creative writing to, and the older students who were very diverse, often had not had any kind of proper education at all, and were sort of at a stage where they were desperate to learn. And some of them, had really severe or less severe learning difficulties. So learning to communicate ideas and concepts to them was really, well, selfishly, it was beneficial to me, and I hope it was. I
But
hope it
I
was.
see you very much as a teacher. Maybe you didn't get a teaching job because of the 2008, you know, crash and crisis and yeah, austerity, as you say. But you are very much a teacher, aren't you, within your work? You do teach courses
Absolutely.
online
Yeah.
and you have, really paved the way for people to write their books through your programs.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'm a coach and a mentor for people, as you say, writing their books, and sort of more generally as well. And I think I don't know, maybe it's genetic as well. I come from, on my father's side, generations of teachers. So, well, actually, teachers and
Really?
vicars. I haven't got the vicar bit, but but I don't know whether teaching comes through as genetics or epigenetics or predispositions. But yeah, I do. I do enjoy teaching and imparting knowledge to people for sure.
And I think it is one of, that you take a course and it is, at the end of it is this promise of a job, which you will then do. And that you and I we take a course and then we do something completely different. And it is, I think, partially through, life circumstances have changed or, the whole country or the whole mood of the world had changed by that time. But also, I think it's partially us.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm really not cut out, and I don't think you are, to be employed, to have a job, to do a 9 to 5 working day, to go into an office
Yeah.
every day. It's just somehow we're just not those people. But that's
Yeah.
fine. So Lisette, what were you doing in 2009 and when
Well,
you
the interesting thing is that I
55?
had taken the Barbara Brennan School of Healing and graduated 2005. And then I'd opened a private practice because like you had to have practice. So I saw people and first for free because I was a student. And then I had this envelope system where I had like a ring of envelopes and they could put money in very discreetly. But then after I graduated, I thought, well, now I need to really make it into a business and charge. Because it was private and because it was not insured, it became more of a coaching practice. I called it my agency for life questions. People came to me with life questions, and I liked it, and I really liked it. But also, I was on boards, as I tend to be, and some of those boards were pretty intense. And so during the day, I would have a client, they would come in for an hour and a half so that we could really have time. So there would be like a conversation. What is up? What have you experienced since last time? And then I would actually often have them on the healing table and do hands-on healing. and align their chakras and take away grief and take away anger and really do the whole energetic healing. And then we would have a bit of a conversation. And I noticed that the after conversation tended to go on for too long, and then I at some point want them out. So I had to learn how to navigate that actually. But so I would have like 4 clients a day,
Wow.
and then in the evening, do my board work. And at some point, I thought this is all going rather slow because, not to my credit, or maybe but really to the credit of what I had learned, people were really benefiting, so it wasn't like a trajectory where they would stay with me for years. I'd go like see them, and sometimes when there was something acute going on, they'd come, for a couple of weeks, every other week or so. But I said like 8 sessions, 10 sessions, you ought to be on your feet and be able to
That's
work with
wonderful. So
this.
you really were healing people. The healing work was showing
Healing, coaching,
results.
it brought results. It really brought results, which was wonderful. But I thought I've learned about, the theory of Wilhelm Reich that we spoke about a couple of installments ago. And why don't I write a book about it? Because then many more people, it's been so useful. It's given me such insight. So then I started to write. I think I started in about 2009, 2010. And then I needed to find a publisher. And I kind of stumbled upon, I don't even know how I find them, 2 men who, one was a marketeer actually, and then the other one was a consultant. And they started this publishing firm. And then I published my first book in 2011, The Childhood Conclusions Fix, which is
Amazing.
there.
Yes,
And
indeed.
yeah, so that was for me also a whole new arena. Whole
Fantastic.
new arena.
And how had you found your clients? I mean, 4 clients a day is a lot. How had you built up that business, that practice?
Yeah, so I don't know. I just talk to people and then at some point they find me. And also I had what I called nests. So I had this one businessman and then he said, well, this is really useful for me. Could I send my best friend is actually my cousin and he has more problems in the relationship, but could he come? And then, then he sent an employee. And then so I had these nests of one client came and then they kind of multiplied. So
Yes, yes.
yeah.
So word of mouth and
Word of mouth, word of mouth. Yeah.
referrals and yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's brilliant. But obviously, people don't give you word of mouth, don't refer other people to you unless your work has
Yeah.
really done something for them. So it must
Yeah.
have been, and do you still have clients like that?
Well, occasionally. Occasionally. I don't advertise it at all, but there's people who want to come and talk. But yeah, sometimes I charge when they really have a particular thing and say, I would want a few sessions with you about this. So then I kind of have like a coach fee. But no, I don't regularly do that anymore. I do
So
talk to people.
did that just sort of fade out of your life naturally? Did it?
Well, also when I know at some point I really closed the practice
Right.
because I had so much board work and I thought I'm all doing that in the evening. I put the board work in the middle of my day. And yeah, so then I closed the practice. I wrote my next book, A Light. And then in 2014, I was talking with my publisher and had the idea for the eldest daughter effect. So then we started organizing the research day, the eldest daughter day, which happened. Oh, I think it actually happened in 2014, and the book came out in 2015. So then there was that. Then books were kind of more into my life. So yeah, also not what I was trained to do, but it happened and I wrote about it and then more books. And I love how both you and I, it kind of grows organically as our interest changes and as we kind of enter another layer into ourself or another place in ourself that we
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
want to come to life.
Well, strangely enough, I mean, that is books is what happened to me after I'd done my diploma, which was called a DITLS. It was a diploma in teaching in the lifelong learning sector, and it was sort of always referred to as a DITLS course.
Okay, a diddle. Yes.
But what happened during that year from 2009 to 2010, that's where how our academic year runs. I had, before I started the course, I had written a book with a friend called The Real Secret, which was, I'd started off meaning to write a novel about women who were using self-help therapies. And I ended up doing so much research on self-help that I actually found somebody who was kind of qualified in that area and wrote another a self-help book. And we'd sort of been trying to get it published and not succeeded. And just as I was finishing my course, we found a publisher. And he had a small publishing company, maybe a bit like your first
Yeah,
publisher.
yeah.
And he published the book in I think it was 2010. And but it wasn't the book itself that kind of changed things for me. It was meeting my publisher, who was called Joe Gregory, discovering that he actually lived in Norfolk, not very far from me. We met at a networking meeting and discovered that we got on very well. His business partner had just left to do something else. And I thought, oh, there's an opportunity for me there. This is really interesting. This is an interesting little publishing company. I can see that I have got nothing to do with the teaching at that point, but I can see that I have got skills that will be useful. So I wrote him a letter, sent him my CV, suggested that maybe, I could be useful in certain areas. And he didn't reply for 2 weeks. And I was like, oh God, I've made a complete fool of myself. How embarrassing. I wish I had not done
Did
that.
you think you were too old for him?
I
Had
thought
a
I might
thought.
be too old. Yes, that was a consideration, but also
Yeah.
just, I wasn't feeling particularly sure of, it wasn't, I had started in publishing, sort of at the beginning of my so-called career. But this was a different kind of publishing. And
Let's call it a career. You've had a career, Lucy. It is varied, but you've had a career. You've always been able to, support yourself and your family. So
well,
let's
that's
not
true.
diminish that.
Okay. So yeah, so I wasn't, I wasn't sure where I was going at that point, and I thought, oh, this I've made a mistake. This is I wish I hadn't done that. And then he came back to me and said, let's work together. That's great.
Wow.
Would you like to be my commissioning editor? And so that was brilliant. I sort of worked with him in his company as it was then, and then I got a sort of which was publishing the books of entrepreneurs and coaches and consultants.
So I would say you are very much in lifelong learning.
Yes, I
Because
know.
if we take our trainings like two, I'm not doing what I was trained to do, but you were trained to be in lifelong learning, and with all these non-fiction books that you've published, you've helped, see the light, you've groomed, the authors. They are all in lifelong learning about what they write about what they know. So I think you've completely diddled. Uh,
I have never made that connection before. That's brilliant. I'm perfectly
oh,
happy with that. I'm not quite such a kind of magpie in terms of there is actually a progression there.
yeah,
And yes.
you've
Oh, thank you.
magnified it.
Yes. Yes. No, thank you for that. That's very gratifying actually.
Good.
But then I suggested that we start a different kind of company with a different business model because I thought that there could be a better way of doing things in terms of working with entrepreneurs. So I suggested we started Rethink Press, and it was very much an experiment at to begin with because we didn't know whether it would work out. And as it happened, that got bigger and bigger. and it kind of subsumed Joe's original company, Intermediate Press. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
you're
that was
very
my.
entrepreneurial as well. I mean, you see an idea and you kind of convince. How much younger is he? Like 10?
Oh, I mean, Joe is, oh goodness, I don't even, he's like 20 something years
You,
younger than me.
you
He's
know,
slightly
here you
older than
are
my
in
sons.
your late 50s, convincing this young man, and he thinks, "Wow, I really found a treasure here." And I
Well, I'm
know
not
that
sure he thought that, but he kind of said, okay, we'll give it a go.
you give it a go, and then you put this idea to him, and together you embark on a new venture.
Yeah, so that was my late 50s. So yes, it was. But it was an interesting time, wasn't it? Because I presume that you also had the recession and perhaps I don't know, austerity government in the
Thanks.
Netherlands, or
I've
did
more or
that?
less forgotten about all that. I mean, I do know about, 2008 kind of financial crisis, or the big bubble that burst, and yeah. But I don't know, I forgot about it. I was in such a different field. I was so much in the idea that all our innovation, all our way of living together and dealing together and how we shape society comes from what we are aware of. So I was active in the Findhorn Foundation, where I think I became chair of that educational charity in 2014. And before that, my friend Robin Alfred was the chair and I was his deputy. So we very much worked together to have people, yeah, come to Findhorn basically. We didn't have online learning then. And kind of experience a sense of self, but also a sense of purpose and a sense of oneness with all that is, that we are part of nature. We're not its boss, but we're part of nature and we can practice co-creation with it. And I was part of the Center for Human Emergence in the Netherlands, which was based on the idea that we would at some point see the unity, the underlying unity of everything, and then come from there. Because in the Netherlands, we'd kind of been stuck in this yeah, what you can call the green meme, which everybody has a say on everything. And we passed amazing laws. We were very early in LGBT, in marriages, same-sex marriages. We were very early in euthanasia, adopting that as part of a real ongoing, deep societal conversation that at some point, it was like, yes, our logical next step, but it was also quite slow. And we felt that at some point, there would be a jump and we would have like business serving society, not kind of usurping material and making it into less and more useful products and then kind of maybe thrown away into the earth that can no longer, absorb everything that we throw at it. So, yeah, I was very much involved in very idealistic spiritual endeavors, which I love.
And how much of those do you feel have come to pass? I mean, you said that, we expected that we would see the unity in everything and then we would work on that basis. Do you feel that that's happened or happened to a certain group of people
Well,
that?
it happens. I think the span of our consciousness has grown. So some people come from that, absolutely. But in our society, there's also, I would say, kind of a bit of a retreat to us versus them. And yeah, so I think the span of where we are at and how and what our various worldviews are is wider, which doesn't make it easier. It's
Right.
very difficult for some of us to understand the anger and the rage of that is behind populism. And I think for them to see what others view as, threats that we are under because of extreme consumerism, and it's not so easy for us to talk And those broad conversations that we had, um, yeah, now there's a very different atmosphere.
Yes, I always get the impression that the Netherlands is more conversational, more open to those sorts of ideas than the UK. Although you've had your right-wing governments more recently, haven't you? Which I
We'll
suppose,
have it.
yeah, yes, which I suppose,
Not very functional, but we have it. And it is on the brink of, it's all the time on the brink. It's like the biggest party has the most, government posts, but they also is always on the brink of pulling the plug and saying, this is not what we meant and we need to compromise too much. We're out of here. So it's very difficult for these people to function. And also, it's very difficult if you've been in a party, and this is on either side of the spectrum, where you've been criticizing what's happened. And then all of a sudden, you find yourself in power and you see how much more complex issues are than you when you sat, on the back bench and kind of go like, ah, stupid. No, of course not. Against,
exactly, exactly. That's exactly what's happening here as well.
yeah.
Our Labour government got in last year after 14 years of Conservative, let's say, mainly mismanagement, certainly towards the latter few years. And yeah, and it's just not easy to turn
It isn't
anything round
easy.
or to,
And I think issues nowadays are so complex, have so many sides and so many side effects that you have to be kind of aware of. And also, it feels like, everybody wants to pass laws, and then, but who upholds them and who knows them? And, yeah.
yeah.
It's not a career I would have aspired to.
No, no, I don't think I'd have been at all a good politician. I wouldn't be able to. I don't think I'd be tough enough, really. I think you've got to be so tough to withstand that kind of criticism and kind of inability to succeed, not because of your own failings, really, just because of structural impossibilities. And particularly now, when there just never seems to be any money, there seemed to be,
Yeah.
it seemed that there used to be more money to do things with, and it's just the situation
Yeah.
since that period of our lives, 2008, 2009, has just gone very much downhill economically worldwide. And I'm not clever enough to understand why that is and why it can't be changed and improved, but it doesn't. Nobody seems to be able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my view is, we're in this consumerist race, and I think life has gotten much better for many people in other parts of the world. Uh, but yeah, it's all based on taking from the earth and making something and then throwing it away. And I
Yeah,
don't think that is a sustainable modus operandi. So,
no.
yeah, but criticism is something I am really not good at getting criticism at all.
That's interesting. Did you just feel what happens when you're criticized? Do you kind of immediately, do you feel wounded or do you feel angry? Do you fight back? What's your,
No, no, no. My first thing is, oh, I'm a failure at everything. People finally see through me, and I've never amounted to anything. There's nothing really that I've done that has been worthwhile. I go into deep pit of self-pity and recrimination and want to lie in my bed and never get up again. And that's why I go. Not very productive, but yeah. So I need to then. You nod. Do you
yes,
recognize?
yes, no, no, no. I feel exactly the same. I feel almost,
So the flogging, the self-flogging is
yes, yes.
very
That
familiar.
yeah, they're right. I should have known. I've always known, really, what on earth made me think I could do anything. And I get quite fearful, really. I find that if I don't know if I've had a disagreement with someone, or even if I've sort of I'm kind of occasionally I get involved in some kind of commenting on somebody's post on social media and people disagree with me. I feel quite sort of scared by, kind of people responding strongly against something I've said or criticizing what I've done in a work situation. It makes me feel like I'm going to be some sort of really deep level. I'm going to be killed. This is, this is the. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's sort
No,
of,
it doesn't sound ridiculous. It was one of my tricks of my coaching or my life issue, my practice, which actually is in my book called A Licht in the Netherlands. It's come out in the US as A Light, but that was, I don't think it is alive anymore. But so things we are, it often, it would be often somebody said, yeah, but if I do that, then, and there's like dot, 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 and we don't fill it in. So I would ask people, so, okay, if you do that, if you don't do something out of the ordinary, if you venture to give your opinion, like you, and then, yeah, then others could criticize me. If they criticize me, I amount to nothing. If I amount to nothing, I'm actually dead.
yeah,
I would say to them, it's very wise, if you really think you're going to die, then please don't do that thing. But
yes,
let's look at it, from an adult point of view. And then you can say, if I do that, I'm actually quite brave. I'm putting myself out there. I might get criticism, I might get hurt, but I'm still alive. And I have my piece of the puzzle, like everybody else does. And then you can kind of, because one is kind of the stairway down to certain death. But then you can also take the stairway up and kind of say, well, let me just commend myself for putting myself out there again. I knew this might happen, but I'm still courageous enough to, put my 2 cents in. And some people might, might given them a novel idea of or supported them in some way, and others don't like it. Well, so be it.
yeah. I think our subconscious operates on a much more fundamental and dramatic level.
Yes.
Like, if this happens, I will be
You'll be
abandoned,
killed, you'll
or
be
I will be
lynched, you'll be
killed.
left alone, nobody will want to know you. And
Yeah.
social death is another form of death, actually.
Yes, yes, but that's completely different from our rational, logical side of things, where of course we know that we're not going to be killed for having a disagreement with somebody in a business relationship or something like that. But the feeling, we can't get rid
Yeah.
of the feeling until
Yeah.
we actually unpick it and look at how deep it goes. Um,
Exactly. And
and
life is perilous.
yeah,
And from our earliest kind of starting to be human, it was always hazardous and perilous, and things were dangerous. And sometimes now maybe they are less, but they can be socially dangerous still. And yeah, so it was one of my so-called tricks to kind of with which my coaching or my mentoring or my healing, it really supported it. Say, let's take this seriously.
yeah,
If this is how you feel, just feel that feeling of threat, but you're still here now. You're
yeah.
still here now. And this threat hasn't happened yet. So acknowledge it and know, that it is an alert. Like in traffic, you need to really watch out. People are coming from left and right, and we're still here, but you have to be alert. And so just see how courageous we actually are.
Yeah, so those feelings have a use. They're there, as you say, as a warning, and we
Yeah.
need to heed them and not just push them down and say, "I'm being stupid. This is ridiculous." But those feelings can make you react badly, can't they? If you feel really threatened,
Yeah.
you can respond to people in not very helpful ways. And
I've recently done it. It's like I was put in, I relived a situation of my early childhood with people who had nothing to do with it. And yeah, yeah. But there too, I had shame. I felt like, oh my God, I've really flown off the handle. And although I had a point, but now that I'm back to being an adult, I can argue my point or even say, you might be able to argue it better, but I do feel I have something here that needs honoring, that needs looking at. And if I can be, just respectful and quiet about it, but insistent, then, it is still on the table.
yeah,
Yeah, and we all have that. And I had to do therapy when I was in my Barbara Brennan school. And And whenever I came with a thing like this, my therapist would say, welcome into the family of humankind. You know, so human to have all this and to experience all that.
Yes, sometimes you do feel I'm the only person this happens to. I'm the only person who gets these
Yeah.
terrified really deep
Yeah.
feelings about things, and everybody else is managing their life and their feelings much better than I am, and I'm and
Oh, everybody else is doing it so much better than we are. And we're the only ones who do that, yet we're still here. And I think, yeah, that's another kind of flogging and alienating. You're the only misfit. Everybody understands this but you. If we speak to ourselves in this you form, we're like the very baddest of teachers, the worst of parents, kind of
yeah,
only putting your child down in pedagogy, you must have learned that that's not the way to stimulate people.
absolutely, yes, yes,
But we
absolutely,
somehow have internalized it, feeling that if we box ourselves into a very tiny little box, we will be safe, which, it isn't true. And also,
no,
nothing really happens there. Life
no.
wants to happen. We want to have experiences.
Yes, yes, that's right. Yes, I mean, certainly doing my teaching practice was a hugely kind of beneficial thing on that level, because I
Yeah.
really, every time I went into a lesson, especially if I was working with a mentor, so I was being observed, I used to feel, "Oh, I'm going to fail. This is going to be a disaster. I can't tick. There are so many things as a teacher, so many boxes you have to tick and be aware of all the time, all through a lesson. And I'm sure as you go on and you do years of practice, it just becomes like everything else. It just becomes,
Yeah. You
kind
have
of
to put in your
automatic.
hours.
But when you're starting out, it's so, there are so many things to remember. And it definitely was, put me into a very, I thought, I'm experienced, I'm good at certain things, but this was, I mean, I'm not saying I was bad at it. I think I was quite a good teacher in many ways, even in that,
I'm
kind
sure
of
you are.
specific education environment. But it was genuinely scary, and I had to, I suppose, one of the things that actually helped was concentrating on the nervousness and the uncertainty of the students I was teaching. So, for
Mm.
example, I mean, I'll never forget one man who was pretty, I mean, I think he was probably in his 40s. He was pretty much illiterate. And it was so frightening for him to come into a situation where he had to admit, I'm sure he had lots of tricks and tips, sort of tricks for kind of getting over that in real life and not ever having to, do anything except sign his name here or there. But he really, really had massive difficulty in understanding how to put the letters together to form words, to read. And it was so, the point, was for me to understand and empathize with him rather than worry about my own fears of, am I going to be able to teach you anything, or
Yeah.
what am I
Yeah.
am I going to do this wrong, and
Yeah.
being able to actually help someone
I think
is
that's a really good trick to kind of take the attention away from yourself
yeah,
and to someone that might actually benefit from what you have learned, and they will know things that you don't know, and just have a wonderful exchange that is useful.
yeah,
I think there's also, I often remind myself, many of us are doing many things for the first time. As somebody who becomes prime minister, he doesn't know or she doesn't know how it is to be prime minister. We're doing it for the first time.
yeah,
And with us, with our varied, work life path, we're doing many things for the first time. And even experienced people get into new situations. Now, we don't really know. So I think both of us, we do the best we can, don't we? We
I
can give
hope so.
ourselves
Yeah,
that.
definitely. But
Yeah.
actually, I think that's a really good way to sort of summarize what we've been saying, because at 55, we were putting ourselves into new situations, both of us,
Yeah.
for, strangely coincidentally. And I think that is so important to keep doing. I mean, we're still doing that at 70. And I think that's what's,
We are.
I think that's what, I mean, I don't want to use a hackneyed phrase keeps us young, but, keeps us energetic, keeps us open, makes it, like this is not a winding down time. It wasn't at 55. and it isn't at 70. And if you keep putting yourself out there, putting yourself in what might feel like rather dangerous situations, actually that's the way to keep stimulated and to keep learning and, to make life interesting and not fall into that. That's why I don't think I never see myself retiring, stopping work. It doesn't make any sense to me, that idea.
No, but I think what you said, to keep learning, be open and enter into new situations, do things that you've never done before, and, you know, also build some trust that you are someone and you can do these things. And if you can't, then,
Yes, I
well,
mean, I suppose
you're learning. You're learning.
yes,
I think that's a very good wrap up for our 31st podcast.
yes. Okay, we'll leave it there then and see you, see you, and see everybody next week.
Yes.